The fear of the number 13 is a long-standing creepy superstition. The number is believed to bring bad luck and misfortune to anyone who uses it. Even now, you'll find buildings that do not recognize the 13th floor of a building. The floors literally jump from 12 and skip up to 14. Doesn't really nullify the fact that that would be the 13th floor anyways, but that's another story. One of the earliest known origins of this superstition comes from ancient India, where it was considered unlucky for 13 people to be sitting together. Also in Nordic mythology, the evil Loki is the 13th guest at a banquet of gods, and it ends with a big argument and a whole lot of violence. Number 9 is a superstition of black cats. Between the 11th and the 14th centuries, Europe's population grew exponentially, and so did the cat population. Cats were spread all across Europe and were seen by many as pests. Now in England, elderly or single women, which were the prime targets of the witch trials, were seen as caretakers of cats. So the legend came about that cats are actually the companions or the familiars of witches, and a familiar is just a demon in the form of an animal usually. Now an English tradition says that Satan was thrown out of heaven into a blackberry bush, and this is where the evil association with the color black comes from. Also, it spawned the notion that black cats are the embodiment of the devil, and some believe that this also includes black dogs too. Number 8, the wrong side of the bed. Traditionally, climbing out of the left side of the bed has some really terrible consequences. It can just really make you have a very, very bad day. Some people have reported to be fired from their jobs. But either way, this comes from the ancient Egyptian belief that the left side belongs to the forces of death and destruction. Some modern hotels and casinos, they design their buildings so that the beds are with the left side facing the wall. And this is just so that their guests can wake up on the right side, the good side. Opening umbrellas indoors. Of course, we have to include this on the list. Umbrellas were once rare and owned by wealthy people, and they were used for protection from the sun's rays, which were believed to contain evil spirits. Now today, many people still shudder in fear when they or someone opens an umbrella indoors. But there is also another origin for this. See, the first rain umbrellas were very large and they're very tightly sprung. So if you opened them carelessly indoors, it would cause lamps and vases and other objects to get knocked off the furniture and fall and break. So yeah, they were seen as being things that brought about bad luck. Breaking a mirror comes in at number 6. The ancient Romans believed that human life renewed itself in 7-year cycles, and this mirrors the cycles of the moon. Because a reflection was actually considered to be somebody's magical likeness or also their soul. So if the reflected image got shattered, then the next 7 years of that person's health would be negatively affected. Parents in the Victorian era, they feared that a mirror could trap their baby's reflection and stunt their growth or lock their souls away inside the mirror. And today you'll even find traditional Jewish families covering mirrors after the death of a loved one so that the departed soul won't get trapped inside of a mirror. Number 5, this one includes hiding your thumbs from the dead. This superstition comes from Japan, and showing your thumbs when walking past a graveyard or near a funeral car is a big no-no. Your parents will die young if you don't hide your thumbs. That's actually a popular Japanese saying where the word for thumb literally means parent finger. It was also said that spirits of the dead can enter the body under the thumbnails. Clip your thumbnails, guys, if you don't want any spirits entering inside of you. Mine are pretty good. Number 4 is an interesting one, pagpag. According to Philippine tradition, pagpag literally means to shake the dust or dirt off. It also is a superstition that says that you should not go straight home from a wake or a vigil for somebody who died. Instead, you're actually to go and spend some time somewhere else just to confuse the spirits that may be following you home. Usually, pagpag is done in a convenience store or a 24-hour fast food restaurant, since those are usually the places that are open late at night. This next one is scary. The 7th son will be a werewolf. Okay, so this is an Argentine superstition, and it says that the 7th son is bound to turn into a werewolf. This is an old myth actually, but it made headlines in the year 2014 when people were saying that the former Argentine president, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, had adopted a boy as her godson to prevent him from turning into a werewolf. But either way, it actually turned out that she did adopt a boy, but the reason was that the seventh son or the seventh daughter of Argentine families are eligible to become the godchild of the president. The superstition at number 2 involves wedding cakes. In Roman times, wedding cakes were baked with wheat, nuts, different types of fruit, and honey, and these ingredients symbolized riches and fertility. Now, the cake was broken over the bride's head to ensure that she had a fertile marriage. Yeah, pretty messy tradition, especially when she's dressed up all beautifully in her wedding dress. Now, another superstition with wedding cakes dates back to the Tudor period between 1485 and 1603, when a single-tiered cake was supposed to be cut by the bride, and if it wasn't cut by her, she would be childless for her entire marriage. Yeah, pretty creepy. Now, the superstition at number 1 involves Friday the 13th. Now, this date has inspired an entire horror film franchise, and not one but 2 hard to pronounce phrases came out of the fear of Friday the 13th. These phrases are Parascavadica Triophobia, as well as Frigatris Igdica Phobia. I probably butchered those pronunciations, but I ain't gonna repeat myself. Those are hard enough to say as it is. All right, either way, these phrases, yes, they do mean the fear of Friday the 13th. The most famous origin story involves Judas Iscariot, who was the apostle who betrayed Jesus in the Bible. He was believed to be the 13th person at the Last Supper. Jesus was crucified on Good Friday, which got linked to the number 13 for a day that was unlucky or unholy. And Friday the 13th was also the day of the mass execution of the Knights Templar, and that was on Friday, October 13th, 1307. And also, a fun fact, did you know that Spanish-speaking countries, like instead of Friday the 13th, Tuesday the 13th is considered the bad or unlucky or an unholy day? Yeah, that surprised me. I had no idea that even existed, Tuesday the 13th. The jinn is known as genie in English, but the jinn, sometimes spelled D-G-I-N-N, they have deep roots in Arab culture. The jinn first popped up on the scene from stories told by Indian, Persian, and Arabian storytellers. They gained a whole lot of attention and fame internationally when they appeared throughout the tales that Sherazade told in the 1001 Nights. It is said that jinn are created from fire and they can take on any form that they choose, whether it's animals or humans. They can also be any size that they feel, and most jinns by nature, they're very hostile, although you'll find some that can be very, very friendly. Moving on to number 9, we have the Qareen. The Qareen is a personal companion jinn that exists opposite of you in the invisible jinn world. The word in Arabic literally means constant companion, so literally they're stuck with you. In a sense, it's like an immaterial demon that sits on your shoulder pretty much and starts telling you to do bad things. The Qareen, they latch onto a person at birth, and they can be very jealous of anyone who tries to get close to you. Yeah, they can be very protective and cause a lot of harm and mishap to somebody that tries to get your attention too far away from them. The Rukh comes in at number 8. The Rukh, also spelled R-U-K-H, or in Arabic R-U-K-H-K-H. This is a gigantic legendary bird that is said to carry off elephant and other large beasts for food. This creature was mentioned in one of Sinbad's stories in the 1001 Nights, and usually it's described as whitish in color. Its wingspan is said to be 48 feet in length, and its feathers are as big as palm leaves. The rock was so big that its eggs were said to be over 150 feet in circumference, and according to Arabic tradition, the creature would only land on the mountain Kaf in the center of the world. Next up, let's look at Al-Anka. This creature has nothing to do with demons though, but it's also a supernatural creature. It looks like a gigantic bird, and it can fly away with anything that it carries, from animals to humans, anything really. and the name in Arabic means the one with the long neck. This creature was mentioned in the ancient Arab legends and books such as Marvels of Things Created and Miraculous Aspects of Things Existing. So yeah, another legendary bird that made it to this list. Moving on to number 6, we have Falak. Now this is a creature that is said to inhabit the underworld, and it's actually going to come out when the world ends. Now this creature, it looks like a snake, but not like a regular snake. This is a massive snake. And the Falak's job is to torture sinners. And this is all taking place after the world ends, by the way. So the Falak themselves, they reside in the 7th hell below everything else. And it's said to be so powerful that only its fear of the greater power of God is the only thing that prevents it from swallowing up everything that is created above it. Yeah, pretty scary, guys. All right, halfway in at number 5, we have the Nas-Nas. Nas-Nas are creatures that have the form of a man, but split down the middle, and one half is completely missing, and one half has the tail of a lamb. So it's like some half human, half animal looking creature, and this monster supposedly originates from the Hadramaut region in Yemen, and some Nas-Nas are described as having wings of bats. Number 4 brings us the were hyena. Were hyenas are pretty much humans who turn into hyenas. Kind of like werewolves, humans that turn into wolves, except in this case, they're hyenas. However, the mythological creature is larger than a hyena, and it can stand on 2 legs. Yes, pretty similar to a werewolf. They are also known to be very deadly and brutal and ruthless creatures, so if you ever come across any one of them, run. Ghouls come in at number 3. Ghouls are thought to be zombie-like jinn who haunt graveyards and they prey on human flesh. They are completely demonic and they're incapable of doing anything good. They're often portrayed as nocturnal creatures who just come out at night. And ghouls are capable of changing form, but you could always spot one if you look for one particular sign, and that's that they have hooves like donkeys and they actually aren't able to change that. Well, so they say anyways. Ghouls, they roam the desert and they often disguise themselves as very attractive women, and this is to distract travelers so that they can come closer, and once they do, they eat them. Number 2 brings us to the Ifrit. Ifrit are intelligent and very cunning. The Ifrit are also known to live in very complex societies, similar to human beings. So they're like elevated forms of jinn, and they are said to prefer caves and underground dwelling places. Although they are very demonic, they are portrayed as being able to change and are capable of becoming religious and good. They emerge as smoke from the ground and form into large winged demons, and they're said to be able to bleed fire. And the scary supernatural creature of the Middle East, coming at number 1, is the Bahamut. Bahamut, also called behemoth in English, is a massive fish creature who serves as the supporter of the world in Arabic cosmography, which is the study of the origins of the cosmos. Also in Hebrew mythology, Bahamut is a large land-dwelling creature, and it's the largest one that has ever been created on the earth. Bahamut is currently lurking in the underworld, and he will return during the chaos and the destruction that's going to happen during the Day of Judgment. Also, ancient mythology states this, and I quote, "All of the waters in the world placed in one of his nostrils would be like a mustard seed in a desert." Yeah, that just gives you an idea of the massive size of Bahamut. Here we have the teaching of Dajjal. Now, Dajjal is also known as the false messiah. Muslims believe that he will cause great destruction by his deceptive powers. And Dajjal also is known to be blind in one of his eyes, but certain Islamic traditions depict Dajjal as having just one eye. Now, it's taught that the biggest fitna, or the biggest testing period in the history of humanity, is gonna happen at the time of Dajjal. Number 9 brings us a teaching of Iblis. Iblis in Islam is the personal name for the devil. He's a very demonic creature and he's set loose on humanity. He spreads evil and misery everything bad pretty much. Islam teaches that Iblis's punishment is postponed until the day of judgment, and Iblis sometimes can appear in human form, and he does this to carry out certain tasks like recruiting new followers. Jinn possession is at number 8. Now, not all jinn are evil according to Islamic belief. However, the jinn who are evil, that's the type of jinn that would possess a human being. But oftentimes people who are possessed by jinns may not be in agony and pain and screaming and with cuts on their face and going crazy like in the movies. However, individuals, they may get really angry or feel like they're forced to do certain actions without even being able to stop themselves. So there's varying types of jinn possession, but this is one of those teachings in Islam that can get pretty scary for some people. Next up is the teaching of hell. Hell is the ultimate punishment for non-believers according to Islam. Hell is described as being extremely hot, like people are going to be boiling there, and there's going to be a lot of suffering, and it's going to continue for disbelievers as long as God sees fit. Now, it's said though that despite the intense pain that people are going to be experiencing in hell, the worst of all their torments is going to be realizing that they're separated from God. Moving on to the teaching at number 6, this involves Munkar and Nakir. Munkar and Nakir in Islamic belief are two angels who test the faith of those who passed away in their tomb. Munkar and Nakir, they ask a person when they pass away who their Lord is, as well as what is their religion, and also who is their prophet. Now, a believer will answer these questions according to the Islamic belief. Now, unbelievers, they cannot answer these questions, but there are people who are going to give an answer, but they answer in a different way, or some of them actually don't even really believe what they're answering. Those are going to be the ones that will continue to be punished while they're in their graves, and their punishment while they're in their graves is going to last up until Judgment Day when they get their final punishment. Moving on to number 5, natural disasters. Natural disasters, according to Islam, are believed to be warnings for those who are sinners. Or in the Quran, you're going to find one passage that says this: "And verily, we will make them taste the near torment, the torment in the life of this world, disasters, calamities, etc., prior to the supreme torment in the hereafter, in order that they may repent and return." And you can find this, by the way, in Surah 32 verses 21 in the Quran. Next up at number 4, I want to talk about Gog and Magog. The people of Yajuj and Majuj, also known as Gog and Magog, are said to be very wild people. They're extremely vicious, and they like to destroy things like crops and trees and buildings, pretty much just everything in their path. They'll destroy people if they get in their way. According to Islamic teachings, there was a righteous man known as Zulkarnain, and he made a barrier which to this day has blocked the way for Yajuj and Majuj to come out until the day that they are going to be released from this barrier. But the teaching that is kind of scary about this is that only God knows that day. It could happen anytime. The next Islamic teaching that we're looking at involves Kiramin Katibin. This, by the way, is an Arabic term that translates to honorable scribe in English. These are two angels called Raqib and Atid, and they sit on human shoulders pretty much. I don't know if it's literal or symbolic, but what they do is that they write down everything that a human does or says. Now, on the day of judgment, each person's book of deeds will be read, and in that book, every small and great thing is recorded in there. But one thing to note though is that all the actions before adolescence, they're not included. Now, over in the Quran, it says this: "That day the people will depart separated into categories to be shown the results of their deeds. So whoever does an atom's weight of good will see it, and whoever does an atom's weight of evil will see it." That's taken from Surah 99 verses 6 to 8. The teaching at number 2 is the Daba. The Daba, similar to Christianity, is referred to also in the Bible as the beast. Now, the Daba, though, is generally thought of as a creature that will appear during the end times, and it's one of the major signs of the day of resurrection in Islam. Now, the role of the Daba will be to pretty much distinguish the believers from the non-believers. This beast will have the power to light up the faces of the believers, and he'll be stamping the faces of disbelievers. The beast also will be seen for the first time after the sun rises over in the west instead of the east. And the final scary teaching is the teaching of the smoke. When you look at the Quran, Surah 44 verses 10 to 12, you're going to find a passage that says this: "Then wait you for the day when the sky will bring forth a visible smoke, covering the people. This is a painful torment. Our Lord, remove from us the torment. Indeed, we are believers." It was also mentioned in the hadith that the Prophet Muhammad described the smoke as a peaceful wind causing all the believers to die. So in a way, they're being protected from the torments of the final hour. For the disbelievers though, this is going to feel like a huge punishment for them, because it will be a great punishment for them.
The Proto-Indo-European creation story. In this myth, Ymir was the first being in Norse mythology. The myth teaches that Ymir is sacrificed, killed by Nordic god Odin out of jealousy, and dismembered. Ymir's body parts are then used to create the universe. This is described in the unnamed collection of Norse poems. From Ymir's flesh, the earth was created, and from his sweat and blood, the sea. Mountains from bone, trees from hair, and from his skull, the sky. And from his eyebrows, the blithe gods made Midgard, home of the sons of men, and from his brains, they sculpted the grim clouds. Alright, let's take a look now at the Cherokee creation story. For the Cherokee, the earth was a mere island floating in a big ocean. It hung from 4 cords and the sky formed the ground, but the darkness made it impossible for the animals to see. So the sun appeared to help them find their way. There were 7 days and 7 nights, and God instructed the animals to stay awake. Some could not and fell asleep, but to those who stayed awake, God gave them the ability to see in the dark. Up next, we have the Hindu creation story. Now for Hindus, there's not just one story of creation, but multiple creation stories that tell of cyclical creation and destruction. The story of Vishnu is one of these creation stories. There was a very large cobra floating along the ocean. Within its coils was a sleeping Vishnu. Suddenly a lotus began growing from Vishnu's navel. When the lotus had bloomed, it is revealed that Brahma, a 4-headed demigod, was contained inside. Brahma decided to split the lotus into 3 separate portions. One part of the lotus became the heavens, the second piece became the sky, and the third part became the earth. He then created birds, fish, trees, plants, humans, and other animals to reside on the earth. Up at number 7, we have the story of the Celtic mythology origin. Celtic mythology states that Ioka, a white mare, became pregnant with the first god Cernunnos after eating berries. It was said that Ioka's birth was so painful, she ripped off bark from a nearby oak tree and cast the bark into the ocean. This created the giants of the deep waters. Her offspring, Cernunnos, became very lonely and decided to make Ioka pregnant again to create other gods and goddesses. But they were bored and wanted to be worshipped, so from that same oak tree, they removed bark and formed the first man and woman. Soon after, Cernunnos created an entire forest of creatures for the first man and woman to live among. Next, we're looking at the Hopi creation story. Taioa, the only creator, created Sotungnang and instructed him to gather water to make the sea on the solid worlds and air to make winds. The last and final act of creation was that of humanity. Rather than create the entirety of the human race himself, Sotungnang created the spider woman. The spider woman took dirt and mixed it with her saliva, and with this mixture formed 2 beings. She sang a creation song and they came to life. She instructed them to go forth and create land and vibration so that the energy of the earth resonated with the energy of the creator. After this instruction, the spider woman created plants, trees, and animals. Her final creation was man. She mixed her saliva with yellow, red, white, and black earth and formed 4 men and 4 women. Their only instruction was to respect Taioa and all he had created. Up at the halfway point in today's video, we're going to look at Greek mythology creation story. There was only vast emptiness at the beginning of this Grecian tale. The only thing in existence was a black bird named Nyx. Nyx laid a golden egg and sat upon it. After many ages, the egg finally hatched and Eros, the god of love, arose. One half of the broken shell rose high and became the sky, sky, the other became the earth. Eros named the sky Uranus and the earth Gaia, and made them fall in love. From their love came children and grandchildren, but their children became fearful of the younger generation's power. Cronus, Gaia, and Uranus's son swallowed all but one child, Zeus. When Zeus reached manhood, he tricked his father Cronus into spitting back up his brothers and sisters, and with the help of his siblings, they all defeated Cronus. With the release of the younger gods, there remained only two things missing: animals and human beings. Zeus instructed his two sons, Prometheus and Epimetheus, to descend to earth and create man, animals, and give them each a gift. Prometheus set forth to create man, and Epimetheus began to create animals. Moving on to the Mayan creation story. In Mayan culture, Tepeo the Maker and Gugumatz the feathered spirit created the world with their thoughts, and they created beings that looked after their creation. First, they made animals of the sky and land, but needed a being that could properly communicate, so they made man. They made him out of clay, but he crumbled apart. Then they tried making him out of wood, but they found that he was empty-headed and empty-hearted. Finally, they made him out of corn, and he was empathetic and intelligent. Who would have thought corn was the key? Alright, up at number 3, we have the Taoist creation story. Within a chaotic universe grew a large black egg. Within the egg, Pangu slept for over 18,000 years, and during this time, the egg balanced both yin and yang until Pangu awoke. Pangu realized he was trapped and broke apart the egg into two separate pieces, splitting up yin and yang. The upper half of the shell became the sky, while the lower part became the earth. The farther he pushed them apart, the taller he grew. Another 18,000 years passed by, and Pangu died. His body fell, and different parts of his body became different parts of the earth. I'm finding some similarities here to other stories, right? His limbs became great and tall mountains, his breath became the wind, and his eyes created the sun and the moon. His blood filled the crevices to form rivers, his voice became loud and boisterous thunder, and his veins and muscles formed fertile land and long roads. The parasites that inhabited his body scattered and became human beings. Now, respectfully, I'm not sure how I feel about the idea of human beings being compared to coming from parasites. How about you? Alright, up next we have the Pelasgian creation story. In this myth, Eurynome was the goddess of all things and the only one in the beginning. She rose out of the chaos naked and divided the sea from the sky and danced on its waves. She caught hold of a north wind, rubbed it between her hands, and created the serpent Ophion. When Eurynome danced, Ophion grew lustful, coiled up her limbs, and coupled with her. Of course, she became pregnant and birthed the sun, the moon, stars, and the earth with its mountains and rivers. They made their home on Mount Olympus, but when Ophion taunted her by saying he created the universe, she bruised his head with her heel and kicked him down to the lower places of the earth. Serpent, devil, lower places. Finding some connections here. Alright, and all the way up at number 1, we have the Genesis creation story. The creation story, as told in the book of Genesis, details a 7-day process. On the first day, God created light and the universe. On the second day, the sky and waters were made. On the third day, God created land and vegetation. On the fourth day, the sun, moon, and stars were made to fill the skies. On the fifth day, both sea and land creatures were born. On the sixth day, man was created, Adam and Eve. On the seventh day, God rested. Now, the paradise of Eden was designated as the perfect land for Adam and Eve. All food was provided to them. There was no death, no pain, and no suffering. Pretty perfect, right? There was only one rule. They were not to eat from the tree of knowledge. However, Eve was tempted by a serpent, the devil, in the garden, persuading her to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge and sharing it with Adam. When she ate the fruit from the tree, God cast them out of Eden. They and all future offspring would then suffer the consequence of sin, pain, and death.
God shows Moses his back, and this is found in the book of Exodus chapter 33 verses 18 to 23. God and prophet Moses, they are known to have direct communication throughout many of the early sections of the Jewish Bible. Moses asks God to reveal his glory, but God warns that anyone who views his divine face will pass away. So God covers Moses' face with his hands and passes by and only shows Moses his back. The story at number 9 involves the sun and the moon standing still, and this is taken from the book of Joshua chapter 10 verses 12 to 14. God responds to our prayer by making the sun and moon just completely stop so that Joshua could continue a major battle during daytime. Now, to quote some of the passage, it goes as follows. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. And there has been no day like that before it and after it, that the Lord heeded the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. The story at number 8 involves a talking donkey. We find this in the book of Numbers 22 verses 21 to 34. A man by the name of Balaam was summoned by a king to go and curse his enemies, but God sent an angel to block the road. Only Balaam's donkey was able to see the angel, and he got scared, so it tries to avoid the angel, and Balaam's foot gets crushed on some walls beside them because they were riding through a narrow path at the time. And the angel doesn't leave, so the donkey lies down, it's not moving, it's really scared, and Balaam gets frustrated. He starts beating the donkey a total of 3 times, and then the donkey starts to speak to him and says, "Am I not your own donkey which you have always ridden? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you?" And Balaam responds, he says, "No." And finally, he's able to see the angel himself and realizes that going and cursing his enemies is not a good idea at all. The story at number 7 involves a Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar, who ends up eating grass. And this story can be found in the book of Daniel chapter 4. It concludes in verses 33. King Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, and he viewed himself as all-powerful. So God decided to put Nebuchadnezzar in his place by making him think that he was a cow. Yeah, a beast of the field. So Nebuchadnezzar, he goes mad. He starts to go out into the fields. He's eating grass. His hair is growing out. His nails are growing out. And this lasts for 7 years. And after 7 years, he finally regains his sanity, and he's humble out of this whole process. So he ends up worshiping God in the end. Pillar of salt comes in at number 6. Now it concludes in Genesis chapter 19 verses 26, but leading up to that passage, we read a story where God has reached his limit of mercy with the 2 cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he's sending judgment on those cities. Now Lot, who's the nephew of the great prophet Abraham, is warned by angels to flee to safety with his family. As Lot and his family are leaving, they are warned to not look back at all. Just keep on going, don't look back. Unfortunately though, his wife looks back and she instantly becomes a pillar of salt. Halfway in, the story at number 5 is found in the book of 1 Kings chapter 20 verses 35 to 38. Now, there was a prophet who was planning to disguise himself as a wounded person, and he had asked someone who was accompanying him to strike him and wound him with his weapon. But the companion refused to do so. So the prophet, who was speaking on behalf of God, looked at his companion and said that since he refused to obey the word of the Lord, well, a lion is going to come and eat him. And that's what happens when the prophet leaves. Now, the prophet found another person and asked him to do the exact same thing, strike him and wound him with his weapon. And that person ends up listening, and his life is spared. Story number 4 is found in the book of 2 Kings chapter 2 verses 23 to 24. Elisha, who is the successor of the prophet Elijah, was walking along the road to Bethel when a group of 42 young boys ran up to him, and as kids do, they started to taunt him because he had a bald head, and they were saying things like, "Get out of here, baldy." So he looked at the boys, he cursed them in the name of the Lord, and 2 bears came out of the woods and ate those children, just like that. And Elisha continues on his way. Snakes on a staff come in next at number 3, and this is found in the book of Numbers 21 verses 5 to 7. So the people of ancient Israel, they began to get discouraged, and their unbelief was kicking in. They started to complain against Moses for bringing them into the wilderness, and they were blaming God for abandoning them. And because of this, they tried to put all the blame on Moses. And as a punishment against the people, God sent some poisonous serpents into their midst, and they tormented the people, and some people even lost their lives. Now, Moses, he had sympathy, and he was praying to God for God to relieve the people of this. this, and God told him to make a bronze serpent and put it on a staff so that when people looked at it, they were healed. And that's what happened. The story number 2 is a pretty sad one. It's found in the book of Judges chapter 11 verses 29 to 40. When a man of God named Jephthah was in battle, he promised that he would sacrifice to God whatever comes out to greet him when he returns back home. And of course, he was thinking that this would be an animal or something, because animals do that when they see their owners come back. They run out, they bark if it's a dog or whatever. But unfortunately, in his case, it turned out to be his daughter who first greeted him. And he voiced his grief and sorrow at the thought of losing his daughter. But his daughter has a surprising reply. She says, well, you made a promise to the Lord, so you gotta do what you gotta do. She does ask, however, for an extension of life for 2 months to be exact, but at the end of those 2 months, she is sacrificed by her father. Now, finally, we end off with a pretty dark one, number 1. It's found in the book of Judges, chapter 19, verses 22 to 30. A man was traveling with his concubine or mistress and is invited as a guest in another man's home. But there was a gang of men in the town that saw this man enter, and they were really attracted to him. So they started to bang on the door that the man was a guest in and ask for him to be sent out. So the owner of the house begs the men outside to stop banging on the door and leave his male guest alone. But they persist, and the man offers his own daughter to them, also his guest's concubine he offers for the men outside. But the gang of men, they still keep on begging for the male guest. So they end up pushing out the male guest's concubine outside of the house to satisfy the gang of men. Now, the gang of men, they do all sorts of indescribably horrible things to her all night until morning. And when the male guest finds her in the morning, she's on the ground in front of the home. She's passed away. He takes her home on his donkey, and then he proceeds to chop her body up into 12 pieces, which he sends to the various different parts of ancient Israel to show people how evil they have become.